Please give a warm round of applause to Andrea Edwards.
I am so excited to be doing the corporate panel today with really, really amazing people. So I will introduce them first. So here we have Stanimira Koleva, and now she is the Senior Vice President and General Manager, Asia Pacific for HERE Technologies. If you want to find one of the most powerful and influential women in technology, we have her in the room today. She's a wonderful person. Am I right? And then we have.
To think so.
Good, good. And then we have Wynthia, another lady I've known for many, many years, and she's worked with some of the biggest companies in the world. Her last job, she was Chief Digital Officer for Aviva, and now she is heading up B2B partner online programs for NTUC Enterprise Online, right? The biggest supermarket chain in Singapore. Did I get it all right? Cool. And of course, we didn't want a wannel. Do you know what a wannel is? It's the opposite of manel, obviously. For those who don't know what that is, it's an all-male panel. We've got the lovely chap, Nishan Weerasinghe, who is the CMO for IBM across ASEAN. He's someone I've had the privilege to work with for the last 3 years. He's an amazing guy, a really out-there thinker, and he's not scared to break the rules, and I love that. All right, so to begin, my question for you. Tell me about a speaker that's really, really made an impact on you. And it doesn't have to be a name of a person, it can be a style of speaking, but somebody who really got it right. Do you want to start, Stanimira?
Okay, why not? Let's kick it off. Hello, fellow speakers. So, I actually, being part of corporate world for a number of years, had the privilege of listening to some very powerful speakers. But the one that really stands up for me is perhaps a Condoleezza Rice. I had a chance to hear her speak at one of the conferences I was at, and it was just amazing. Everything about her was just so impactful. She had a great story to tell, obviously amazing experiences, but the way she conveyed it, it was just so genuine, and it was so much her. It was just, she was just putting so much of her out there. It was so authentic. And the one story I still remember is how she obviously comes from the black minority in US, and she's lived through the dark ages in US where there was a lot of racist acts, and they were not supposed to sit next to a white person on the bus and stuff like that. And the one story that I still remember is she narrated how her father told her, you have the right to take that seat on the bus, and if somebody minds it, that they have to move out of there. And it was just so impactful for me. It was just the story, it was the way she conveyed it, and I still remember it. So I guess that's a good indicator.
Yes, I would have to say it's Al Gore. I think less than 2 years ago, Al Gore released his sequel to his movie, and I do not know how I got invited, but I received an invite to attend. I don't ask why, just turn up, right? So he was, obviously the topic was talking about was climate change, but I think what struck me was he came across as such a warm person who has a genuine passion and had devoted all of that time and resources to invest in an issue that is so pertinent to the world that we live in. And he left a really strong impression on me. And I after the talk was over, I just became a complete fangirl and got somebody to take a photo for me. But he left a really strong impression.
The first person that struck an impression on me was my grandmother, because if I didn't listen to her, she could really hold a room. I'd get a clout around the ears. But actually, I'd say that lots of political speakers and everything, but Anthony Bourdain, rest in peace, he wasn't a speaker. He was a heroin addict, a chef, a foodie, a narrator, a traveler of the world. And he had a message, he had something to say, and it was very genuine. And I think sometimes we can be a bit too speakery, too polished. When I think about, I'm a CMO, and I think about our brand, and what we find more than anything, if anything's too crafted and too polished, and doesn't have a soul and have authenticity, people don't believe it. People actually believe real human beings, and that's absolutely key. And for me, that's why Anthony Bourdain just stuck out a mile, because I like rule breakers. I like people who don't take the status quo. I love what Delia was saying earlier. Totally empathize. What an amazing story that was. That was absolutely incredible. It was, for me, one of the best things I've heard in a very long time. But just being honest, being true to yourself, and that comes through miles more than what I call speakerese.
All right, so for Nishan and for Stanimira, when a speaker fails to deliver, why do you think it happens? Who wants to go first?
Okay, but maybe I can talk about my failures as a speaker.
I know you
you
really struggled with it, right?
I did. So a little personal story is I'm Bulgarian originally, and I moved to live in England in '99, and I was struggling with English. I wasn't struggling. I understood everything people said, well, mostly, but I actually wasn't very good in expressing myself in English, let's put it this way. And there was long years when I was thinking in Bulgarian, trying to translate in English, which never actually gets in the way of, putting 3 sentences together in a good way. So then I decided, as an antidote of the fact that I wasn't a very good speaker, that I'm going to lead with content. So I'm going to prove everyone how knowledgeable I am and how much I understand the business and what I'm talking about. And this and that. And that also failed because, frankly, I was just not following some basics. I would go on a stage and present my business plan for the year to the boardroom. And I would lose the audience in the next 3 minutes, after I start speaking. Because I would just take a deep dive into every little detail to be known about my business. And these people, they took my voice away. Here you go. And these people, they actually didn't want to know every little detail. It was there, right? Lesson number 1, you actually have to calibrate the speech to the audience, right? You need to talk their language. You have to try to position in their shoes what's important to them and convey the message in terms that they're interested to get, right? That's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2, then after that, the only 2 people who came to me to congratulate me after that infamous 30 minutes of torturing my audience was one fellow guy who I knew every detail of my business, said, "Oh, you did a fabulous job," And then the other one was my VP of HR who said, "We'll give you a coach." I said, well, okay, well, that's the... So my coach actually at the time was a guy who was an ex-BBC anchor. I was lucky enough to work with this guy. He managed to shock me on the first meeting we had is by having a full 5-man crew, video crew, who took video of me speaking about 24 port switches, which was the type of thing I was selling at the time. And when I saw that video, I just wanted to die. I was just so embarrassed of myself. And he said, "Don't worry, you're not alone. Have you seen interviews of Sherry Blair at Downing 10? She was one, I don't know how many of you have lived in England at the time, but she was really very poor public speaker. And so I said, oh, okay. So then I had to start from basics. And lesson number 2 I learned was just throw away every consciousness you have walking on the stage. Because being on stage, it's not about you. You're just the means of delivering a message. So let not your self-consciousness of who you are get in the way of you being an efficient deliverer of message. Lesson number 3, remember my thing about let's power through with lots of content. Preparation. It didn't even strike my head. They don't like my voice. Here you go. I'll use Andrea's voice. Lesson number 3 was, never mind how much you know the subject you're talking about, without preparing and properly rehearsing and going over it, you either run overtime, or you're inefficient of how you deliver, where you accentuate, what are the important things to strike on. So golden rules, prepare for me, golden rules for me, prepare, don't get your body language or self-consciousness get in the way of what you're delivering. And you just make sure that you're relevant to the audience you're speaking to.
Yeah, so as a marketer, I'm always thinking about communications, about cut-through communications. How do you get a message understood and believed and acted upon? And one of the first things you get taught is, it's the balance between your target audience, your content, and your creative, if you like, right? So the images and the words. and what everyone focuses on actually is the creative. It's like, what does the creative look like? Is it zappy? Is it cool? And like 80% of the time is focused on that. Actually, as a marketer, 80% of the time should be focused on the target audience. So exactly what Stanimira said. If you understand your target audience and you understand what content is going to resonate with them, so content then is second, and then creativity is last, which is why I say delivery is important, but not as much as understanding who the target audience is, figuring out why they're there, and what help they're coming for, right? So, things have moved on a lot in the world. People don't come to events, to pick up product brochures anymore, right? It's much more about connecting with other people, and it's to solve a problem. So how are they going to be helped? So you have to think about, and I've failed many times in my past where I've gone and thought, I'm really scared about public speaking and I'm not a natural public speaker. I need to have the most professional voice, and I need to be the number one person in this profession on this subject. I must know everything, right? I'm scared otherwise, right? Someone in the audience is going to know more than me. Actually, that's totally wrong. It's about what message do I have to help the people that are there? That's the key. And if you can always come back to how am I helping the people that are in that room, you'll always win and you'll always be remembered. And just be authentic yourself. And those to me are the things that I've failed at many times, and they've been hard knocks and I've learned from, and I try and practice all the time. Just think about helping. That's key.
My video story, when I turned up in London in 1995, I was pitching for 3Com. You were probably already there, right? And I listened to myself on video. I couldn't even understand what I was saying. It was the country accent had to go fast. Anyway, but absolutely, this is an important question for everyone in the room. Who is the person responsible for making the decision to buy a speaker? And how do you reach them? How do you influence them? But of course, in business today, there's 12 points of influence before a decision, especially in B2B. That's the figure these days. Who else do you need to influence?
So the process of choosing a speaker, I would say that there are many cooks in the process, and it really often depends. I'm just now thinking about my experience working for technology firms, and sometimes the content could be global in nature. So you're inheriting content, and you're inheriting key messages that you want to be able to convey in your events, and at times you're looking for speakers that global gave you, but at other times you're looking for speakers that can convey a similar message, and then you will look in the region or locally. And in most of the positions I've been in, where we are trying to run things at a regional level, we are looking for speakers that are able to work with us across those multiple countries. Obviously, it saves us a lot more work. But the other thing that is also important is we look for recommendation from speakers very widely. Where there are agencies involved, they may recommend, but we really also reach out to people in the company, say, have you seen or come across somebody who spoke really well in these areas, in these topics? So in some ways, how do you get on the radar? You get on the radar when you are out there speaking. Yep. And giving good presentations, leaving a strong impression, because that all comes back. And then, in this day and age, not all events are physical events. So if there are webinars, there are podcasts, it then also matters to us whether that particular speaker, do we think they are going to be effective in that medium? And do they have experience in that medium?
Yeah. What about finding someone who's really powerful on social media? Would that then influence, because then you would go and explore deeper whether they can also speak? Do you see social as a powerful platform as well?
Yes, definitely. I think in the past you may depend a lot more on speakers' bureaus or agency recommendations, but these days it is possible for us to see for ourselves what are some of the work certain speakers have done. They may not have been in our radar in the past, but we can access the work that they have done. Yeah. We can see that for ourselves. Yeah.
So the digital footprint is very important as well. So Michelle, you started talking about the sustainability and the focus for the business, and I know Nishan and I have spoken about it as well. So one of my observations, apart from BNP Paribas, is that a lot of businesses, they're not even having the conversations around climate change. Did you all see or come across the biodiversity report that came out last week? I mean, it's quite frightening, some of the information that's coming out, right? And so I'm sort of a bit gobsmacked that companies aren't having these conversations about, when we were at Microsoft, how many people used to fly in Atlanta every year? The carbon footprint of that event must have been enormous, right? So what are the conversations, and I know your business is having it, but maybe more generally what you're seeing as well. What are the conversations taking place? Is it taking place yet? If it's not, do you feel that it's coming? Because I think when it happens, it's going to be quick. Because, there's a flying shame campaign. Have you seen that? So especially in Europe, you're getting shamed for flying, right? So the shaming aspect is starting to come up. So companies being excessive in a way that makes an impact on the environment, it's going to start to really matter.
Yeah, I think you touched on this earlier. I think it comes down to corporate culture and how you do things. I've seen it in my own personal story. IBM's got 350,000 employees around the world, so our carbon footprint is a very big deal for us. So we're involved in a lot of sustainability. I won't go through that. But also, we believe in that we're here for world progress, using technology to drive world progress. So we're talking about AI and the Internet of Things and connecting data points to make the world a better place, to prepare for the impact of climate change, right? I was in Indonesia only a few days ago, and we were talking there to some government organizations around how do we connect meteorology, things that are happening in the climate, what's happening in the seismic activity in land, to try and anticipate earthquakes. Yeah. These government audiences weren't working together. How do we use technology to bring that together to give people better warning? And that really came out of the disaster in Lombok that happened last year. Some of the work that we were doing there in terms of disaster relief, mobilizing our people. But then thinking about, Indonesia sits on a ring of fire. It's the most disaster-prone place in the world, right? Something like 200 active volcanoes there. When you look at the actual the volcano map, it's like everywhere. So it's a big deal. The government loses $1 billion in economic impact every year. It's massive. So we think from a technology perspective, it was interesting to hear about AI earlier, but this AI for social good is a huge thing for us, right? So then connecting that back to, the cultural aspect of it. So that's a big piece of what we're doing in terms of give back. Yep. The next thing is when you look at, I used to run growth markets for the world, which it stretched from Moscow to Greater China, all the way through to Latin America. I spent most of my time on a plane, right? I was 70% across the world, traveling for 2 weeks at a time. That was like 1 million follicles ago and 25 kilos ago, right? Like 10 years. And for 8 years of my life, that was it. And IBM started to implement collaboration tools, video conferencing, online learning tools, and we saw it dropped around. What was really interesting, I used to travel a lot, and I had a colleague of mine who worked for a different company. I used to always see her in the airport lounges around the world. And the crazy thing was, she worked for a video conferencing company. I'm like, hold on. You're in a video conferencing company, and you're traveling as much as me, and you're complaining about really what's going on. It just shows you that unless you embed technology and those tools in the way that you work, and you run your business that way culturally, it actually doesn't change. I went from traveling 80% of my time to about 20% of my time. And what you said was really interesting, because it's about, we're humans, we're pack animals, we like to meet, right? You meet someone, you develop a sense of trust and knowing. That means you can do business on the phone, over video. It's really easy. So we have to think about what the role of events are in the future. Because when you actually even look at the marketing world, 70% of our budget used to be on events. It's not anymore, because people aren't going to events, frankly. They aren't, right? The way people consume and understand information is so different today. There's so much available online, so much available through webinars, so much available through people's personal branding in terms of what they're blogging about. So how do you learn? It's not about picking up a brochure, as I said. It's about you go to, well, how do I find out about this? Oh, who do I trust? Who's eminent? Who's got a personal footprint, and their personal brand means that I trust them, and I can see it online, right? absolutely key. So personal branding, absolutely key. The event space is coming down dramatically. I'm not sure it's about the carbon footprint discussion. I think just people aren't traveling anymore, right? They don't have time to do that. The senior people aren't, certainly. You have to have smaller, more virtual forums to help people learn.
Yeah.
I think that's key.
Yeah. That's really interesting about the budgets have gone down significantly on the events front. But even webinars, right? That's sort of changing as well. Stanimira, a question for you. So I was reading some research from LinkedIn. Apparently leaders value soft skills 50% more than hard skills. So empathy, creativity. What do you think what are the topics that matter right now in business as a leader of business? What's your biggest priority when you're looking at your teams and what you want them to learn and how you want them to grow? What do you think are the priorities for leaders today?
So maybe a little bit background of what I'm busy with at the moment is I'm leading quite a bit of a change in the business I run, which is starting from many years of selling licenses for digital maps to car manufacturers, which are used for navigation, embedded navigation, the ugly devices you know from some of the older generation cars, to really the world of using location in everything, like on your mobile device, connected with tracking supply chain or positioning where you are for emergency, etc., etc. So our world is changing quite a bit. And the one thing that I think matters a lot is how my team and we as a company really understand that we have to care about the outcome of what we do. And it's really, empathy is part of it, but attitude and the way of projecting in your head in every position and in the organization of what you're going to do, the little thing that you might do that's going to produce an outcome for that customer and sit in the customer's shoes. Because I believe many of our businesses will actually move into this notion of B2B2C, right? And for many businesses like mine, which come from purely B2B environment, that B2B2C understanding is a very difficult one, I have to say. And I would argue that skills that help our organizations and each of my employees to deliver create awareness of what that B2B2C model should be, that eventually the consumer is the one that matters. And through partnerships and the people who actually buy our product, you actually have to deliver consumer experience, and then working backwards from there is a very important thing. And you can think for yourselves what skills that require, but I would take attitude over technical skills any day. And ability to understand that it's being in the customer's shoes is what's important, and projecting that journey backwards in what that means for our everyday business life is probably the best way I can describe the transformation I need to make.
Yeah. Well, as someone who's worked with you and seen you in action, you're one of the most empathetic leaders I've ever seen, and I know you've been very frustrated with the companies you've worked with because they're not. They're too internally focused, where you're always externally focused, and you always have been. And it's part of your power, but it's been a frustration too, right? So empathy and cultural intelligence, all those sort of things. All right, Wynthia, as our Asian-born lady on the panel, we've got a lot of people in the room who are aspiring speakers. They're working really hard to get on the big global stages. What advice would you give them to be successful as professional speakers? And I know that's not what you do, but there's character qualities, right? What advice would you give?
I'll say two things: passion and empathy. Whether you are already an established speaker or one starting out, I think you are always have to focus on what you are passionate about. When you are speaking from the heart, it is something that you care about, it is something that you are interested about, you will already know it really well, or you would invest the time to know that topic really well. And that comes through, always. The second is empathy. Care about what the audience cares about. The best speakers I found is never, like what you rightly said, it's not about the speaker. it is about the people in the audience. What is it that the people in the audience cares about? What is it that you are going to hope to leave with them after you are done? And in different occasions, you will have different types of audience. It is important to invest time to understand who's going to be in the room, what's keeping them up, and then have a message that is relevant to them.
One of the other things I notice, especially being in Asia, is I hear a lot of people who aren't from Asia making assumptions about what the audience is going to be like, and I think they're all wrong. I think some of the most engaged audiences these days are in Asia. I think it's really changed a lot, and you can get amazing interactions. And let's prove this right. We've got 4 minutes left. We need some questions for our panellists. Who's got a question? Oh, come on, we can't be dead. You can't prove me wrong, guys. Got 4 amazing people here. Yep.
What's the best non-traditional way you found out about a speaker that's great?
So the best non-traditional way that they've found out about a speaker. Non-traditional.
I've asked people. Word of mouth is huge, right, for me. And also someone's social footprint. So I'd say as speakers, focus on your passion and being eminent in the space that you're in, as opposed to being a great speaker. It's about video blogs, it's about co-creating content online, it's about helping your communities. And if you're seen as helping your communities and you're eminent in your space, the speaking opportunities will come. And not only speaking opportunities, business opportunities as a whole. It isn't about, for me, it's not about business about being a speaker. It's much broader than that.
Well, that's how you found me, right?
Yeah, that's how I found you.
Yeah. Anyone? Oh, and now you're putting your hands up. All right, we've got 2 minutes, 30 seconds.
How do you deal with this bias? Female speakers, male speakers, speakers from different cultural backgrounds, because it is still there at some stage.
All right, so the bias, male versus female, diversity.
I have listened to some very powerful female speakers. In my part of the business, I'm very passionate about girls in STEM, like getting enough girls into university for science and technology, which today unfortunately is not. And so actually putting a strong female technology speaker in front of such audience, I find always very powerful. So I mean, there are things, you know, with maximizing the outcome of what we can get, and these hidden points that we need to hit apart from just the business content, that can actually play to the strengths of who the speaker is.
All right, we're out of time. Sorry, guys. But you're going to stay for lunch? Or you have to run off? Yeah, everyone's here? All right, so thank you very much to our lovely panelists. Thank you.